Welcome to Shambhavi Spectrum Marketing Magic Industry Insights. I have with me Mr. Umesh Agarwal, who is a retail project management expert. And retail project management, all these three words are something which I've just come across in books. And I would like to know from him directly what is his background and what his job profile. Thank you so much for agreeing to be here. Please, Mr. Umesh, tell me more about your background and tell me more about what your work actually comprises of.
Thank you, Dr. Shambhavi, for inviting me for your program. I feel privileged to be here today and discussing my project management and retail journey and what all I have done in last 20 years. Although it's not something to talk about that, but that's why I said I feel privileged to be here and talking about it. Thank you. So just to give you a background, I would start from my graduation. So I did my graduation as a BR graduate, which is a Bachelor of Architecture graduate. So basically, I'm an architect by education. But once I came out of the college, I started working on different projects as a project manager. So I would say that by profession, I'm a project manager. And then over a period of time, I also did PMP certification from PMI USA, which is basically project management professional certification, which was required to be a certified project manager. Now, what has happened is that when I started my journey as an architect, for the first few years, I was basically learning the tricks of the trade. And I found out that my interest lies more into one stream of architecture rather than taking care of the entire architecture as such. Because architecture in those days when I passed out was basically, designing buildings and constructing them. But then I found that those are, long-term projects, the projects which do not happen quickly. So that's why when I came across one of the retail brands which was about to roll out their stores across different regions, I grabbed that opportunity as a stepping stone to get into some kind of a specialized architectural job. And that's what I would say my retail journey started. So it was way back in 2001 when I started working on the retail fit out project management. So you asked me about as to what is retail fit project management. Let me give you a little brief about it. Retail project management is basically, you need to know about as to which brand it is, first of all. So, and then you need to learn about that brand, because when I say you need to know about brand means there could be fashion brand, there could be accessories brand, there could be shoe brand, jewelry brand, whatever it is, all the shops across different places you see everywhere is some kind of a retail. So you need to first understand, because since it was a beginning for me, I wanted to understand that as to what it is. And then when you say that you have to understand retail, you basically understand the philosophy behind that retail brand as to what is their USP, why they are known as what they are, and then what do they want in their stores. Because having a brand is one thing, and replicating that philosophy and the brand image into a physical store is completely different thing. So as a architect or a project manager for that retail brand, it was the onus lied on us as to how do you convey that message into a physical store to your end consumers. So that is what we need to understand, and that's what I did it. That's a very crucial part. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I want to interrupt you at this point and ask you that when the information sharing takes place from the organization which has asked you to do the retail part of it and the fit out and stuff, what is the involvement of the organization, or is it a department? How does it work? Please tell me more about this part of it.
See, generally, the retail expansion happens in two ways. So the days in which I'm talking about, we didn't have that franchisee concept where a overseas retail brand or a homegrown retail brand will have the franchisee kind of a contract with their franchisees, and then they will roll out as a franchisee store. So these were kind of company owned stores. So they kind of conceptualized the whole, the image of the brand, and then they rolled out themselves without having the franchisee agreements with anyone. So that was one side, one type of retail store expansion. Then there is another type, which was in those days used by the brands in Europe, US, UK, and all that, where, like for instance, Marks and Spencer, which is a UK-based brand. Now, when they want to come to any region apart from UK, what do? They have to, tie up with somebody in that particular region, a retailer or someone who understands the whole retail business, and then they tie up with them. So to answer your question as to how do they decide which partner they should have, first of all, like if I talk you about UAE, how it happens here is that there are established retailers already here, which are there in the business for almost 20, 25 years, since the days retailing started in this part of the world. So these guys, since I'm talking about those days when Dubai did not, or UAE did not have any homegrown brands. They were completely dependable on all these internationally recognized brands. So they were very keen on taking the franchisee of those brands. So we had only a couple of retailers in those days when I came here, and I found that there are hardly anybody. But then there were a lot of international brands which were already there in this part of the world. And how they did it, they were associated with some local partner who himself was not a retailer, but then he had the enough resources to expand that brand into this region. So this was a one-to-one communication.
Correct. Yes. What you're saying is, in those days, we didn't have much of free zone concept. So it was basically, there was always a local partner. So I understand what you're saying very.
Yes. So that was one thing. Yes. And then there were retailers who had gone in partnership with a few brands already, and they wanted more brands. So it is basically the brand who had to evaluate the capacity of a retailer here, because the brand's image is at stake at this point. Yes.
Right. So my question actually was, when the company, let's say an ABC company, decides to roll out a store, and they say, ask people like you who are project managers. So does the whole company, is there one person who comes in, informs all this? Is there one spokesperson, or do they have a team who is set for this particular project? That was the interaction which I was.
There was. Yes, to answer specifically to this particular question, there are three different departments who work in any retailer company. One is obviously the brand identification department, which identifies as to which brand they should be partnering with. So that kind of a brand the department will always be there in any retailer's fold. Second will be, once you have agreed that okay, this is the brand which has to come, then they get in touch with those brands, because there is obviously an understanding or a news that particular brand wants to come over here. So it is a mutual beneficial thing. So you get in touch with them, and then you bring them on board. And then the second is the leasing and contractual department, which obviously looks into the contractual aspects of it, and then the retail department itself, which takes into consideration all the retail aspect of that brand in this particular region, as to which are those locations where they should be present, what kind of a merchandise they should sell here based on the experience we have in this part of the world, what pricing it should be, how big or small their store should be, what kind of a schematic layout of their store should be. Because the thing is, you cannot just replicate what you are in your home country, because the customer profile is completely different here, the choice of the people are completely different here, and the kind of rentals you have in this part of the world is completely different than what you have in their home countries. So you need to balance out all these things, and also look at as to what is your profitability in coming years. And then comes the project management department, which kinds of constructs the store for these brands into the locations which I've agreed upon, and then they maintain these stores for as long as that store is there in that particular location, whether it is a high street or a mall location. So that's how I would say.
Okay. So, how much time minimum do you think an organization needs to actually have the retail fit out the way a company wants it? For any store, let us say in a mall, how much time minimum which is required to do a proper job of it and to justify the job which is done?
See, the answer which I gave you for the last question, if I take you from the day a retailer thinks about bringing a brand to this region and the day the brand opens its first store, it can happen straightforward in 180 days. That's the bare minimum. 6 months is what we are looking at. And in terms of exactly as to how long it takes for a shop to build in a mall or a high street location, it depends on what is the size of the store. So if we are talking about a Paris Gallery kind of a thing, or a Galeries Lafayette kind of a thing, or a M&S kind of a thing, obviously these are large format stores, which are anywhere between 3,000 to 10,000 square meter. They take in the range of 150, 170 days. Anything which is, let's say, 100 to 300 square meter, which are generally the average size of the retail store, it takes between 45 to 60 days. That's what it is.
Okay, but the planning happens, you're saying, like 180 days. So that means when we see an advertisement launching soon, about 15, 20 days earlier or a month earlier, that means that there is so much of lead time background which has already gone
through into it. Absolutely.
Gone into the project, and people have been hands-on working on it. So
absolutely.
So from conceptual stage, it has actually become into more of a tangible.
Absolutely.
By that time.
Yes.
So you've worked in various parts of the Gulf region, and now you've been in Dubai. Tell me a little bit of what you have seen, the changes, and we'll come to the COVID part of it little later. But if you could tell me, what are the changes that you have seen in the retailing format in Dubai, which some of which maybe you expected and some which came as unexpected?
See, I'll speak from my experience as a project manager, because when I dealt with a brand, how it used to happen way back, let's say in early 2000, that first of all the communication used to happen on emails or on phones. These were the only two mediums available to us in those days. And emails also, if you have to do the attachments do not used to come all together because the capacity of the attachment was very, very low. So you could not share a 10 MB file or what you can do today. And then there were nothing like other softwares where you can online, upload your files, and then on the other end somebody can download it, which is easily available nowadays. There was no WhatsApp, there was no social media, there was nothing else whatsoever. So first of all, the communication was a little bit slow. Secondly, when it comes on in terms of the physical retail stores, in terms of how we used to market the store, it was all into the print media, first of all. So you either had all these hoardings on Sheikh Zayed Road or on the, the major important, areas of Dubai for that matter, where you will have large hoardings where it was said that opening soon, this and that store on this particular day in this mall or whatever. And we had even advertisements on TV and on FM channels. These were the only three mediums, I would say. And then one more, which was very crude way of doing it on the day or a day before the opening of the store, is a flyer in newspapers. So that was also there. So these were the only mediums which we could do it. Once the customer has reached to your store and he is into the store, you will have, all these danglers hanging from the ceiling, where it will show around as to what is available, what is the offer, and all those kind of stuff. Then there will be girls standing around as not sales staff but as advertisement staff, who will kind of update you about what the brand is, what the offers are, what merchandise is available, what they can buy, what they cannot what are the bundle offers and those kind of, these were all communication, kind of one-to-one communication. The customer did not have all these information before he entered into the store. So that's how the information used to get conveyed to the consumers. Yeah.
Yes. And so some information there is nowadays, this has also become a little bit of a fashion, whether it's a hotel or a retail outlet, that there is a soft opening and then there's a proper opening. How did that come about? And what is the importance of having a soft opening?
Yes. See, what happens is the concept of soft opening was to create a buzz around it, basically. Because what happens generally is that there are a few intricacies into a rollout of a brand or a store in this part of the region where you want to do everything on a fast pace. So you're able to build the store, you're able to get all the approvals to open the store, and so you do open. But then sometimes what happens is that either you have not received all of your merchandise or the full range of products which you have to merchandise, or you could not convince the person who was supposed to inaugurate your store, and you have the pressure either from the landlord or otherwise internally, where you want to encash a particular occasion which is falling at that time. So you make a soft opening, and then it also helps you in creating the buzz to understand as to what the customer wants. So maybe a week or 10 days before you do the soft opening, and then once everything falls in place, like your merchandise has been received, you're able to guess as to what customers are liking, what customers are not liking. So you can, rework around your merchandising planning and all that. And third is obviously your chief guest, whoever it was, is also agreed to come and cut the ribbon for you. So you do a grand opening. So that's but then it does not take much of time between soft opening and the grand opening. It will be maybe 2 weeks time or something like that.
So that would have actually been my next question, that how important is it to have a celebrity endorsement for an opening or for a launch, and what kind of difference does it make for the organization and for the end consumer? Having a celebrity do the launch, especially Dubai is so famous, I think from Bollywood, Hollywood, everywhere, from the Arab world, always celebrities keep visiting Dubai and UAE as their favorite destination. So how important is a celebrity endorsement? I'm again asking you this question specifically because my subject is marketing metrics, and we want to understand that about endorsement. What is the importance of it? Of course, yes, one should have the money and the affordability. We understand that part of it. But apart from that, how important is a celebrity endorsement?
When you ask me this question, the two people who came into my mind immediately is way back from mid-80s. These are the two cricketers from India, because since I belong to India and I love cricket, so I would like to name these two guys, Sunil Gavaskar and Kapil Dev.
Right.
Sunil Gavaskar used to do the ad of Big Jam, which was a shooting company in those days. And Kapil Dev used to do the shaving cream Palmolive. So these two guys, were celebrity in their own sense in those days, because cricket is like, big sport in India. And anybody who does good in cricket is kind of a celebrity, big celebrity in India. Now, so what I'm trying to make a point here is that celebrity endorsement is as long as we all exist. So since our childhood, we have been seeing that only the celebrity changes, the brand remains there, So that is very much important, because when I started shaving, to be very honest with you, when I started shaving, my first shaving cream was Palmolive. Because of the same reason, because I've seen Kapil Dev using it and Kapil Dev endorsing it or Kapil Dev recommending it. So the first thing which comes into our mind is who endorses it, and if it is one of the celebrity whom you kind of follow, then obviously you will definitely use those products. So in terms of how celebrity endorsement is important, this is pretty important even today. That is the case. Now you have people from different walks of life who are endorsing these projects. In earlier days, it was only a couple of industries or the people from a couple of industries who were endorsing it. Now it's a wide range of people. Even the book authors are endorsing a lot of products. So which was not the case in earlier days. So celebrity endorsement, I believe, is a very, very sure shot, successful marketing, strategy, which I would suggest. Yeah.
So that's great. But for a launch or an opening, the importance, do you think the customer has a long memory enough to remember that this was launched also? Or is it just the association of that brand and that the launch and that celebrity? Is it just that, or is it that for the launch having someone especially important?
See, the example I gave you is from mid 80s. And today, to 2020, I still remember that. So you can see that it etch in your memory, and you don't forget it. That is first thing. That is brand endorsement. In the same way, generally it happens that the person who has been endorsing your product will be called to launch the retail store also. Generally it happens. I'm not saying it happens mandatorily, but generally it happens that you call them for the launch of the stores also. So I mean, as a customer, you will definitely associate it. You've seen that particular celebrity on television or on print media, or you've heard him endorsing the same on a radio channel. So when you hear about him endorsing a physical retail store, you kind of associate with that. That's what I would say.
I agree with you on that. In fact, it just comes to my mind that there was a popular jewelry brand and they had 6 celebrities and opened 6 showrooms.
Absolutely.
At
Yes.
the same time. I think maybe even the time everything was same in the UAE, and it was something to remember by, because they were top in whatever field that they were.
So that's another strategy. I mean, it's good that you mentioned this thing. That was another strategy as to how do you make all the stores, because now you're opening 6 different stores, 6 different locations. You cannot have the same celebrity endorsing it because he cannot travel at 6 different locations in a day or at the same time. So it's good to have 6 different celebrities doing it at the same time. You are creating more buzz around your brand than you could have done it with just 1 or 2 stores being done separately. So that's a marketing strategy. I would say very, very shrewd in that case. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for bringing and highlighting that yes, this was the retailing part of it, but how it was used for marketing of the organization. This was, and like you said, it was a very smart strategy, because this is many years back, and like I still remember this happening in UAE. So that is.
Just to add one more thing here, I also remember one of the, a famous local juice brand, when they opened their retail stores, every time they called their celebrity who endorses that brand, he came and he make juices for the people who came for the opening. He himself, made the juices. He handed over it to the customers. So there was a personal touch also, and he added another dimension to the brand. And why it is important? Because there are a lot of people who associate themselves with that celebrity, and when they feel that he himself served or himself or herself served the product to them, they feel more associated or more loyal to that. That's what happened actually.
The emotional connect with the brand becomes that much more rather than just the functional or rational part.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That is so very nice to hear about.
Yeah.
So now talking about the last 8-10 months, and talking about the online marketing, which was before the online retailing, which was happening. UAE and most of the Gulf countries have always been on cash on delivery kind of a system, and people still needed that touch sense. They were not so happy sharing their details, the consumer sharing their details, and cash on delivery was the most popular in UAE as well as in the world. It is till this COVID happened, it was the most popular format. And has that, how much has that changed? What do you think? What is the current trend? I know contactless payment, we talk about many other things. How much has it actually changed? What is your take on this? What do you think about it?
See, based on my understanding, first I will talk about the COD, the so-called cash on delivery thing. Why cash on delivery was made popular? Because the mistrust, or the people were not very habitual of ordering something online, paying upfront for it, and then doubting whether they will receive that product delivered to their doorstep or not. So that trust in the e-commerce website or the portal was not there, and that's the reason they ordered it. They wanted it to get delivered first, have it in their hand, check it. If everything is found okay, then only they make the payment. Otherwise, they can very well return it without making the payment. So that is why the cash on delivery was propagated initially when all these e-commerce businesses started. But over a period of time, what has happened is that, to be honest with you, the consumers have taken disadvantage of that service or that flexibility which was given. There were people who kind of got it delivered, and then they tried it. Like suppose a shoe was delivered, they tried the shoe, and then they used it for some time, and then they found that no, this is not good, and then they returned it or sent it back. So the cash on delivery was not the mode of transaction which the e-commerce companies wanted. It was just that they wanted to, become familiar to all these consumers, and then slowly and slowly they wanted to remove this. Eventually, what had happened is that they could not remove it because it was still a preferred mode of payment for so many consumers. So what they did is they've added an extra fees to that. So if you are making a cash on delivery, you need to pay something extra. This was just to deter you from going for that option. Yeah. And also at the same time, to discourage COD, they've also made sure that if you make upfront payment, you might get a free delivery, or you might get some discount, or you might get a return facility without incurring any additional payment or anything. So these kind of things, they did it. Now, to answer your second part of the question, where you said as to how what has changed in the last few months, cash on delivery is obviously where you exchanging cash. So the delivery guy takes cash from you, you hand over the cash to him, you take the items which are delivered to you. So there was a transaction which was where the physical contact was happening. Obviously, because of the contact COVID situation, people wanted to avoid this physical contact. So you would have seen that all these e-commerce retailers have gone into different scenarios where they said, okay, you can get it delivered outside your home. The guy will only knock your door or just ring your bell, or he will not do that also. He will just leave it at a particular time, and you will get a message that your packet is delivered. So you can open your door and then take it inside. Cash on delivery cannot happen in that case, because obviously you're not even meeting the delivery guy. So if you have to opt for those, obviously you have to pay upfront. So that is something which has changed. Secondly, the retailers have allowed payment to happen by credit cards or the touchless, Apple Pays and the Samsung Pays and these kind of payment methods, where again you are not touching any device or any person or anything. So that has been propagated. So this is what I would say the change has happened. And uh, this is not because COVID it has happened. I would say COVID has kind of accelerated that. It was happening in any case. It would have taken maybe 12 or 18 months to become a reality. It happened much earlier. That's what I would say. Yeah.
So, when I'm thinking about retail stores in the 80s or 70s, 80s, when I came here, the late 80s, so we had these shops. Then slowly you started having a barcode or RFID. Then these scanners came, the scanners in the retail outlets came. And now we have temperature checks when you go into any of the malls. And apart from COVID also, what is the role of technology as you visualize it for the next few years in retail? How is a retailer, how does he have to change himself? As a retail fit out person, as a project manager, what is your advice which you give to people? Because we presume that when you start a shop today, for the next 20 years, 25 years, his shop is going to remain there. He may do some minor changes, but the shop outside will remain there. So what are the things that you recommend to him, and what should their vision be? What should they be looking at?
See, I'll go back to my early days in this part of the world, where the lease agreement which the landlord used to do with the retailer was a minimum for 7 to 10 years, because that was the norm there, that for 7 to 10 years nothing changes, nothing is going to change. So let's have that much years of lease. Over a period of time, that has changed to 3 to 5 years, and today, as we speak, it is in some landlord's case, it is for 1 year only. Now, why I'm referring lease agreement here is because lease is where all terms and conditions are mentioned as to what do you have to do as retailer at every renewal. So if it is for 1 year, that means when you renew the lease, there will be certain set of conditions which you have to follow before the lease gets renewed. One of them is to adopt the technology of that time. So suppose when I talk about the early 2000s, we were talking about 7 to 9 years of lease because the technology penetration or technology advancement was not so rapid. It was not happening so fast that you have to change everything in every year or every 2 years or 3 years. It was like 5, 7 years. You can live with the same technology, same kind of concept, same kind of a way of doing business. So nothing used to change. Even the landlords were agreeing for that it's fine. You carry on with the same shop. But and I remember that we never used to renovate our store because one of the conditions was this also, that you have to renovate when you renew the lease. So that was one of the conditions. And when you renovate, you also have to, ensure that you roll out with a different concept, which is more, practical and applicable for the consumer needs and behavior of that time. So if I talk about 2007, it was completely a different, style of business or retailing. Now, if I talk about 2020, we are completely talking about two different things. Now, to answer the second part of your question as to how this technology has helped retailers or how it has changed. See, recently I have written an article on LinkedIn where I talked about the digital transformation of retail. So that is one thing, that retailing has completely changed from the manually made invoices to not even giving the invoice to you. Yeah. So today you are asked whether you need an invoice or not. So the invoice can come to your mail or to your WhatsApp or to you, whichever media you want. The invoice can be shared with you on that medium. Second is, you don't even have to speak to a sales staff or a person behind the cash till. You can just scan the product, pay for the product, put it in your bag, and go out of the stores. Nobody will speak to you. So technology has gone to that extent where you are not needed to speak to anyone. You do your shopping without any interference, any kind of communication. Buy your product, go out of the stores without anything. That is from the how a consumer and a retail staff interacts with each other. Then third point is as to what has happened in terms of the marketing. I would say when I came here, when I joined one of the retailer here, we, as I said in one of the answer of the earlier question, that most of the marketing used to happen through these danglers and the roll-ups and digitally printed papers on walls or on different places within the store. When 5 years back, I will talk about, we moved into having digital screens. So all those paper or hard copy printouts or the marketing mediums have been completely removed. Today, you go to any retail stores, you don't have all these things. Either you have TV screens which are constantly running the advertisements. This could be generic advertisements, this could be specific advertisements, this could be offers, this could be whatever you want. You can just with the click of a button, you can have anything that broadcast there. Then the time came when now these screens were there on the walls. So, but the wall space is very important in a retail store. Every inch of a wall space is basically money for you. So either you can use it for advertising your products or you can use it to display your product. It depends on you. Like a large store, you would, since you will have a lot of floor space, you can utilize the wall space for your advertisements and all those things. But in a smaller store where you have very less floor space, you would like to utilize your wall space more to display the merchandising. So there was always a buy-in between as to whether you want to display the product or you want to advertise your product. So to resolve that situation, the TV screens have been brought, or the digital screens have been brought onto the floor fixture itself. So you have fixture where the product is also displayed, and then you have a small screen or something which is also doing the advertisement, or it is showing the price of that particular product, or the details of that particular product. So
you can see the colors, and you can even in
everything.
car showrooms, you can look at one product and then you can just scan through and it shows the colors.
Absolutely. Even the price tags which used to be there either on the product itself or just in front of the product on the fixture, that price tag has been converted into a digital screen, where with a click of button, if you are, suppose you are suddenly coming up with an offer in a during the day. Earlier, what used to happen? You have to change each price point. So you cannot change it just by a click of a button. So you can only plan it for the next day. And in the night, all the retail staff used to, insert the new price point and all that. Now, just by the click of the button, you can change the price. So half an hour before the price was, let's say 100, it has changed to 99 or 90 within a click of a button, half an hour after. And it all happens in a flash of a second, including the same thing in your cash till also, because somebody has to scan the barcode and sell it to you. So the same price has to reflect there as well. And we are talking about the retail stores. It happens on your online channel also at the same time. So all channels it happens. Last thing which I want to mention here is that retailing is no more a physical retail store. It has become an omni-channel kind of a business, where if you are not present into different mediums, you are going to lose. Now, there is a big debate going on as to what is the future of physical retail, the brick and mortar retail, as we call it.
Would have been my next question.
Yes. So absolutely. So to answer that in advance is brick and mortar retail store is going to stay here for the simple reason. I mean, let's say in COVID, what happened for a few months during the lockdown, we were all staying back in our homes or our places, wherever we were. We were not allowed to go out. The malls were closed. The retail stores were closed. We did not do any kind of shopping. Everything what we were doing was only online. And that's the reason you see that the growth of online happened in the last 7 to 8 months. Irrespective of whether you are present in the online business or not, you had to go for online. So all those retailers who were not present in online, they were losing business. So they eventually, in a hustle, they opened their, launched their websites, they put all their products there and they started selling. So that was one thing. Second thing, what has happened is as to how you can innovate it further. Now, when I'm saying omni-channel is like you sitting at your place. You want to buy a product. What you do first thing is you either came across about that product on a social media channel. It could be Facebook, it could be Instagram, or any other social media channels what we have in nowadays. So you saw that product, you found it useful, or you said, you thought, I have to order it. Now, obviously, there are retailers who have made it possible that you can order it right from the social media channel itself, which will take it, by a click of button, it will take you to their e-commerce website or wherever, and you can pay for it and you can buy it. Or you can see the product on the social media channel, then you can go or click on there. It will take you to their e-commerce website. You can see everything, select, put everything in your cart, and you can save it there. And then you think that no, there is a product which I cannot just order it. I want to test it. I want to try it. I want to touch, feel it. You can go to the retail stores, touch, feel, try everything, and still don't buy it there. Order it on your mobile phone, and it will get delivered either to you, or you can pick it from the store then and there. So this has never been the case earlier. We never had this. we had to go to a store, we had to try it, we had to buy it then and there and then bring it home. There was no delivery, there was no digital platform, there was nothing whatsoever. So that's the change I would say has come.
Sorry,
Yes.
I muted myself because there was noise in the background which I couldn't control. Sorry about that.
Yes. No,
And
that's
yes,
fine.
what you said just now, I have myself done this in Ace Hardware, where I have seen the product and come out and ordered online because it was at a better price, the same product. And I've also done in Splash, where the product was not available, the choice which I wanted in the store at that particular time, but I was able to order it through my phone. The price was also cheaper compared to the in-store, and the choice, the variety which I wanted, it was available. So what you're saying
Absolutely.
is actually the consumer is the one who is driving all these. That is the reason why the retailers have to come up with these kind of different options rather than the other way around, like where we think that because we were not ready to buy online, we were not buying. Now we have to buy online, so we are buying online. So it's not only just the retailer, it's also the consumer who's driving the market. In all this, there's just one small question which I want to ask. Our generation is very used to the human interaction. So even IVR messages really bother us that there is nobody to listen to me. Now mental health, physical health, all these things have become important, and mental well-being is considered, very, now people are looking at it very seriously. So in this kind of a format where there is no interaction with the salesperson, like you said, you can go, you can buy yourself. What will be the role of word of mouth, and what will be the role of an interaction of the salesperson influencing your decision, which they are, salespeople are trained to influence towards a product or a suitability, not necessarily that they are trying to push it to you, but more in terms of what is required by you for your personal needs or family needs or whatever. How does that, what is going to be that part of the future from a retailer's side?
See, there are two aspects of your question. The first thing is we need to do, a data analysis as to who are the consumers who are using the digital platforms or the, online platforms to do their shopping. Based on my own analysis, you would see that 60 to 65% of these consumers are the young generation, which are below 35 or 30. Yeah. COVID has, kind of forced the other age groups also to do their buyings on online channels. And this was a forced thing. It is not that it has become a habit for those consumers now, but it has definitely, kind of educated them as to what is there online and why you should be buying it online. But at the same time, the same analysis also shows that most of the buying happened for the essentials. Non-essentials were still not bought online. The ratio of the essentials against the non-essentials was, more in terms of essentials than non-essentials. So that is one thing. Second is as to where are we going and how it is going to impact the whole retail business. See, what I want to say here is that I have also mentioned it in one of my LinkedIn posts where I said, what is the new normal post COVID? Yeah, the new normal for retail. There are few brands who are already exploring the option of putting option in their online channel where suppose you want to buy a product. Right now, what is available is the product's descriptions, product's price, product's photographs from all angles, and then who is selling it. And then you can also make comparison between the similar products on the same channel. So that is what is available as an end consumer on the website. Now, there are two things which have been added. In the fashion industry, what has happened is you can even try it out digitally. So suppose you want to buy a top for yourself. You want to know as to how it is going to look because you cannot travel to a physical store, or you don't want to go to a physical store to buy it, or you don't have time to do that. they are providing this kind of a virtual reality kind of a thing, which will be available next to the product itself. You can utilize that. You can put your picture, or you can be there in front of the camera at that time, and then the virtual reality or the artificial intelligence, as they call it, will allow you to wear that top virtually and see as to how does it look. So that is something, because why do you go to a retail store? To touch, feel, and try. So these are the three things. If you are able to get that online, then obviously that sorts one of the issues because of which you go to a store. So that is one thing which has been tried. Second thing, uh, most of the times it happens that there is a new product launched and it is available in the store, and then there is somebody who has come to launch that product in the store. So there is always a a wish or desire to go to the store, meet with that celebrity or the person who has come to launch that product, and also try test that product. The same thing is replicated online now. So the celebrity will still be there in the store, and you will have that live streaming happening on your whichever channel you want to use. It could be your social media page, or it could be your online platform where you want to watch that, or you can go to the website of that particular retailer where he will be broadcasting that live. So that is what has happened, and COVID has induced this thing, because people were not ready to go to the physical store. The products were still being brought into the store. The retailers were still wanted you to know as to what products have been introduced, and they still want you to know as to what are the feature of that product, how that product is being used, and how it is beneficial to you. How do you do it when the customer is not there, right there in front of the retailer in the retail stores? So this is kind of replicating that whole experience online. So I would still say that they could resolve the issue to a certain extent, but yes, there are still a few things which you cannot buy online. You still, jewelry for that matter, unless you are very particular, you are very sure about the product, and you know that yes, I've seen it and I want it, you can very well order it. But here also you have seen it, or you have found it useful, or you've met with somebody wearing that thing, that's why you thought, okay, this is useful, then only you can order. Shoes for that matter, size, color, comfort, everything you can decide nowadays online. But that once it comes to your feet, then only you know how good or bad it was. I'm not only talking about the people cribbing about that, oh, it was shown as red on the website and I got a light red or a dark red. That's something which happens. But then in terms of the usability of that product, you don't come to know unless you try it.
Right. So two things which are coming out, and especially from the last answer which you've given me. One is data is the way forward, which
Absolutely.
Funnily enough, my subject, marketing effectiveness, actually starts the first chapter with data and metrics. So we have come back to it, the data, and when it becomes enough that you can make interpretations and analyze it, which is what managers forward would be doing.
Sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Shambhavi, but I would like to mention here, since you talked about data, I wanted to take one more example.
Please.
The onslaught of machine learning and the artificial intelligence, which is completely data driven. If you look at it, if you don't have data, all these things cannot work. All the algorithms of machine learning and artificial intelligence are completely, the data is food for them. Now, the example which I'm taking here is, we used to work, we means in retail industry, we used to work on Excel sheets, where all the data about your sales, your purchases, your consumer data, everything was stored in Excel sheets. And these Excel sheets over a period of time have become so data heavy that you didn't know how to process that data using Excel or any other software for that matter. And that is where this big data concept or the machine learning concept has helped. Now, just to give you an example, we used to supply to a lot of small time traders in some parts of the city. So what used to happen is that suppose they wanted to order a particular product which we sell as the exclusive retailers in this part of the world. So they will give a call to our area manager and say that, oh, I need this 10 numbers. Can you please deliver? Now, what area manager will do? He will take a note of that. He will say it will be delivered in 24 hours. Now, what this area manager will do, he will pass on this information to the backend, to the distribution center. The distribution center will compile all these orders of that particular area and then prepare the order next day morning, keep it ready. Somebody will pick it in his van or his, whatever vehicle it is to be delivered. And then on his way, he will keep on delivering to all the orders which is received on the way, and then the order will be delivered to the last person who ordered it. So within 24 hours, it used to happen. But the thing here is the consumer is not ready to wait for 24 hours.
Correct.
So if I go to that shop and if I say that I need this particular product, do you have it? What do you say? I don't have it now, but I can get you in 24 hours. Please come back tomorrow same time, and you will have your product. He says, no, I need it now. Online channels are, fighting with each other to make the delivery as soon as possible. Right from 30 minutes to 4 hours, you get the product delivered to you the moment you ordered after that. Now, what we have done to resolve this issue of the time lag of 24 hours is, since we have got almost 5,000 such retailers, small-time retailers whom we were supplying, we have collected the data of all these retailers for last 10 years. Because we've been supplying to these guys for almost 15, 17 years. So we have all the data in Excel format. What we have done is we have uploaded this data into our machine learning softwares, where now we are getting insights as to supplier A in this location on a Friday evening sells these many numbers of this particular product. So now I know about supplier A's complete visibility as to what does he want, when does he want, even minute to minute I can tell you as to 6 o'clock Friday evening what product sells at this place. Now I did not have this insight earlier. This has been made possible only through this data crunching using machine learning and artificial intelligence. And I have this product delivered to him much in advance. So when the customer comes, he has the full range of product available already there. So you're not losing the customer. Your sales have increased almost by 35% just by using this thing.
Your forecasting.
Your forecasting, we are able to do it much before. Much earlier.
Right.
So this is what I wanted to, touch base on.
So it helps you and it helps the trader.
It's a win-win situation for both of us.
And the consumer. So for everyone, it's a win-win, because even the consumer does not have time to actually go and seek this anywhere else.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
So it's a great, such a very good insight, I must say, and I should really thank you, because like I said, when we were just talking about data, and I was saying the second thing is that brick and mortar will stay. When you say that, for me, at least in my lifetime, that's a good thing. There will be shops which you will go to, because some of them are not just for the that you're buying, but it's also for the emotional connect which you have with certain shops. And
absolutely.
The shopping experience that you have with your family members or whoever you're going out with, friends, whatever. So that part of it, once we are out of all the situation into our normal routine, whatever, whenever it is, that part will be there. So it gives me great solace. And there's so much of information. There's so much that we've learned from you. I have personally learned so much, and you've given so lot of in-depth into what goes on into retailing, though we started from retailing, but from the brand associations to that. I'm really grateful to you. You spent so much time. And for young budding marketing managers who don't want to focus only on the social media, digital marketing aspect of it, is there something which you would like to say to them, some takeaway which you would suggest to them, what they should look out for, or what are the signs which one should be looking out as a marketing manager? for any kind of organization?
Yes. To answer your question briefly, although I'm not a marketing expert, but based on my experience in retail industry, what I can say is a marketeer should never, forget about the age-old marketing, instruments and the fundamentals. That is not going to go away anytime soon. What they can do is they can get the insights from all the latest digital marketing platforms or the, like I said, machine learning and artificial intelligence instruments. They can get insights from it, but they should still convey the same using their own way of communication rather than doing it through the other channels. So for example, if a marketeer come across that people are able to buy and try a shoe online, so they can order online. But then for a marketeer, the insight here is this, that people are ready to buy even shoes online. Yeah. So for a shoe company which is selling shoe, who wants to market the shoe, as a marketeer, the insight is this, that people are ready to buy it online. Yeah.
Right.
So you can, use this insight to tell them as to what do you feel they should be doing to propagate their product. So that's what I would say. And this word of mouth thing, which has been age-old marketing, instrument, is not going to go away. I'm telling you, even today, if you, Shambhavi, tell me that, Umesh, this particular product I bought, I found it very useful, you should also try it, I will trust more on you than what a social media platform tells me. So that is not going to go away.
I'm very happy that you're reaffirming this for us, because I think in almost all these talks that we've had with different experts from different industries, ultimately everybody has come back to word of mouth and said that holds value. So, and word of mouth will come only when your customer is happy, which means
Absolutely.
again, the marketer, the brand, the company, small, big, their customer is the focus. They should be customer centric. Their focus should be the customer, and it just brings us back. And I cannot, like I said, I cannot thank you enough for it. And I hope that we will continue our discussion in another platform and more detail another time. Thank you so much, Umesh, for spending so much time. And on behalf of all my audience, I would like to thank you once again and have a great future. And let us, and please, one last thing, I would like you to please share the link of the two articles which you mentioned to me, so
Absolutely.
that I can share it and I can put it in the description of this later on. Thank you so
much. I'll do that. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I feel so, I didn't realize that it's been almost an hour we've been speaking. I mean, it just flew off. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting. And I hope that this helps you. And
definitely. It has helped me. And then I'm sure it's going to help all our audience, definitely.
Your audience as well. Thank you so much. Have a good evening. Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.